excited to be here and be able to share some possibilities for RTI and together as it blends with the Breaking Ranks model. There are many organizational patterns that we all use currently or we know we can use as we put RTI together in our buildings. This is only one, but the strategies that I'm going to share with you today come directly from Breaking Ranks, and they also are supported with a great deal of research and good practice. I've learned the power of these strategies through my career, a long-time high school principal, also and combined with the research, as I said, from Breaking Ranks. We know that, that school improvement is extremely important to the kinds of things that we're faced with in the current climate in education. So I want to be respectful of what you are doing already, give you some suggestions about perhaps how we might be able to modify or do some things a little bit differently, and also be respectful of your time in terms of getting to the crux of the matter here. So my background is that I was, of course, a teacher like many of you were. I was a high school principal for many years, assistant principal as well, and I was a counselor, and I also helped direct some things at the district level. So I've kind of seen things from all perspectives. But in my current role as a consultant with Forward Design and also with the Center for Secondary School Redesign, I get around into a lot of different schools, and the diversity of those schools include everyone from charter to private to religious to public high schools that are in wealthier communities to high schools and middle schools that are in very challenged communities in our urban centers. So there's a spectrum, but the nice thing about these strategies is that they work in all settings. What you see on the slide is woven together with each component of the Breaking Ranks RTI system of student support. I will allude to these components as we move through the presentation together today. If you have questions, please use the chat window to reply your thoughts. Peter will assist us with the questions you might have. I will try to address questions at strategic times throughout the presentation, but definitely at the end of the webinar we will turn to that at that time as well. Because RTI and Breaking Ranks are both provocative systems of advocating for best practice and for the support of student engagement and learning, some of the things you will hear today might challenge us to change how we view our system of schooling. The notion of breaking ranks is just that. We need to move away from many of the traditional patterns of organization and the practices that we are all familiar with to the practices that are suggested in Breaking Ranks. It suggests that we really need to create a new way of thinking and behaving than we have in our traditional sense. We often hear this, but today I'd like to be able to give you a few ideas about how we can demonstrate this in our practice. Many of us are doing some of these things already. Some of us might be doing all of them, and we can enlist your background and your experience with these things later on in the program. The challenge is that we are implementing them as a system. One of these things can help us. All of them can make a significant difference in the life of our children and our students and in the overall achievement in our schools. It's the synergy of all these organizational strategies that converts a mildly successful school into a high-yield, great school. With your staff, for example, you can rate each one of these concepts from a fist to 5 continuum, or whatever other kind of process that you might already use with your staff when you introduce new ideas. But it's essential that we get a feel for where the staff is currently operating. What are their essential beliefs in order for the strategies to be effective? I always advocate for triangulating the things that we are suggesting are powerful for students to learn at higher levels. For example, what do I mean by that? Oftentimes teachers say, I've been teaching for 20 years. Or sometimes you'll hear principals say, I've been doing this for 20 years. And I know what works. And that's true. For the most part, they do. The problem with that is does the research support the practice that they advocate for, or is it only their own experience? What I'm advocating for is that we use these strategies and anything else that we believe the staff feels is effective, but we also balance it with supportive evidence from the field where it's done in other settings and supported by the independent research. So if we can say what we do in our classrooms and what we do in our schools is reinforced by success in other settings and by the research that has proven best practice, we can be pretty confident that these things will work. This slide simply shows the RTI as a system of problem solving and learning issues, problem solving the learning issues using data or a measurement piece to inform instruction. Now, depending on your current situation, the culture in your district, and the expectations in your district, you have measurements that you need to be aware of and you need to address already. So the state systems, the high, the systems that absolutely must be met in order for students to graduate from high school, those are things that we all need to be mindful of. The system that I'm going to suggest here, in terms of the strategies that we use, address all those kinds of things and authentic learning in addition to that. So it's not just testing and preparation for testing, but authentic and critical thinking that goes into the process of student engagement. There's 3 tiers to RTI, and notice the circles in this illustration of the breaking ranks model. Superimposed on the breaking ranks model is the RTI model, the tiered approach, tier 1, 2, and 3. In all aspects, personalization is what supports the student learning in the center. This all focuses on personalization of the student. So superimposed on the model of RTI is the RTI framework of tiered interventions. The RTI model closes all the gaps of students missing the support they need for learning. The 3 tiers close all the gaps of learning when they work as a systematic process. Note that the components in red represent the RTI high-yield strategies. No longer is learning left to chance, and it's not left to invitation. Instead, it is realigned to close monitoring and mandatory support. We move from learning from invitation to learning by expectation. Many of our schools are built on the model, mine was too, of providing great opportunities for kids to learn. What we need today in our new model of school effectiveness is that every student is expected to achieve, not simply by given an opportunity, but by being expected to participate and engage. And while that's easier said than done, I'm totally aware of that, that is the mental attitude we need to have among our staff in order to make RTI and high-achieving schools work. Let me relate 3 stories of real teachers. We all have these teachers on our staff. We have the toxic teacher. This is a teacher who purports that only her students that learn from her in the way that she teaches will achieve at a high level. I know this teacher, and she did get certain students to achieve at high levels. Unfortunately, the kinds of tactics that she used for measurement, the kinds of tactics that she used for instruction were alienating the students that were somewhere in the middle of the pack or were far less. In fact, she did teach many of the high talented students, and what's happened is that many of the students were alienated not only from the subject matter, but from being able to look at success in her content area, which was math, as something that was respectful to pursue. The pseudo teacher is someone who really was attractive in terms of his teaching. He taught science. He was a very authentic teacher, and the students loved him. He had extremely good critical thinking strategies that he used in the classroom. Very active, project-oriented kinds of daily lessons. The students were engaged. Unfortunately, his assessment was traditional, and he had over a 30% failure rate because the way he assessed was inconsistent with the way he taught. Expediency needed to be met in his mind. And the last teacher is the authentic teacher. Very successful. It would be interesting to note that this teacher who taught freshmen never taught freshmen prior to 2 years before I assigned that to her late in her career. So she was a very experienced teacher. She never assigned homework. She had the highest achieving grades for her freshman group. She had a cross-section, heterogeneously grouped class, a large class of 30 or more students in the room for each of her sections. And she had the highest standardized test scores on the state assessments. Again, she never assigned homework outside the class. Had very high achieving students, and by way of noting the kind of teacher she was, she attracted many of the students that many of the other teachers did not desire to have in their classes. But she was extremely successful. I tell you these stories to illustrate the kinds of things that teachers can do and the mindset that you need to have in order to make learning successful. The strategies that I'm going to share with you are not by themselves going to turn a school around, but the mindset that goes together with the kind of strategies that I will share.